the biggest change is inside our heads, right? Everyone can have their opinions. Everyone can tell you what they think it should be, the judgments, societal rules, whatever you want to call it. But we have to overcome that negativity ourselves. And that was probably the biggest change on my journey. And it still can be a factor. I still have some of those old messages coming through.
Welcome back to the Obesity Stories Show. I am your host, Dr. Dan. Today, my guest is Sherri. Now, Sherri has a very unique story in that she is the classic Wisconsin farm girl. She grew up on the farm, being very active, and still struggled with her weight. Into adulthood, she tried just about every single diet plan and commercial program in existence, and hey, her weight still was an issue. Some of Sherri's struggles have centered around emotional eating and all or nothing type thinking. She has also had some not so great healthcare professional interactions, but she has fortunately found a care team that is now really taking the time to work with her and get to the root of the underlying causes and issues to help her manage her weight not only today, but also into the future. And unfortunately, it wasn't until Sherri had a stroke that she really decided she needed to kick things into high gear and is now really thriving in everything she does. Sherri and I had a really amazing discussion today. We really got to dive into a number of different topics and things, including the where and why of how emotional eating develops, as well as some of the problems with these commercial diet programs and plans and how they can create this dichotomy of good or bad foods. As well, we discussed the role that healthcare providers might be playing in terms of that all or nothing type thinking that many of us will develop. And finally, we talked about some of the really cool experiences that Sherri has had in terms of her workplace and how a workplace can actually help their employees to truly live a healthier lifestyle. And Sherri also shared how her involvement in serving others through community gardens and other programs has been instrumental in helping her to move the needle in managing her weight. I think you're really going to love this episode, and I'm excited to hear some of the feedback. Now, if you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, turn on those notifications so that you never miss out when I put out another video. The ongoing support continues to mean so much to me, so thank you. I truly appreciate it. And if you want to share your story, be sure to go to the links down below, click on the link, fill out our form, and our team will reach out to you to see about you coming on the Obesity Stories with myself. And without further ado, let's go to Sherri. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, and we're going to be hearing from Sherri and her story that is, well, the story that she has with obesity and the struggle over the course of her life. So welcome to the show, Sherri. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you.
My pleasure. Well, and thank you for having the courage to coming and speaking about your story and telling us about it. I'm very excited to dive into more of your story because I think it's very relatable to a number of individuals. It's certainly a background that I see on a day-to-day basis in my practice and a lot of the common themes that I'll kind of see there. So I mean, without further ado, why don't we dive in and you tell us a little bit about your story? When did your weight become an issue for you? What has been the struggles and challenges over the course of your life and so on?
Okay, sure. Probably a place to start is I grew up here in northern Wisconsin on a dairy farm. And certainly for us, money was difficult. There were three children in my family. Um, I was very active as a child. We helped weed and plant the two huge gardens so that my mother could can at the end of every season. So we'd have fresh food for the winter. Most of our meat was, of course, beef because it was a dairy farm. So having chicken or other types of meat was actually a rare treat. I think that, I would ride my bike, I would go fishing, I was out in the fields, herding cows or picking berries or just exploring. And I think back to that time and I felt like I was really active, that I was probably kind of the normal child. I had a good childhood. I had parents who loved me and did the best that they could for me. But as I've become an adult, I look back on that and I go, I kind of blocked out that there were kids on the bus in grade school who were like, you're fat or you're a cow, you should be out in the field with the cows. And those type of comments that kids make because they don't understand differences and diversity. So as I look back on that experience, I go, I guess I was heavier than a lot of children in my same classes and that, but I didn't see it that way till I was about 10 years old. And I remember sitting in the living room after we had had a big meal. My mother, she was a great cook. For every meal at night, we had beef, we had potatoes or some type of potato. We might have a vegetable, but she always made sure we had dessert, right? And so I remember in my mind, I can see images of her cleaning up from dinner, putting food away, and standing at the counter eating. And later, as I became an adult, I actually asked her about that. And she said what she learned about herself was that she did that when she was stressed, when she and my father maybe had fights. So she was really an emotional eater. And as a child, and I'm not putting blame on her or anything, but as a child, you see that pattern of behavior and you think that's normal, right? So as I started to become a teen, she said, well, let's try to nip your weight in the bud now. My physical education teacher at the parent teacher conferences said, Sherri can't jump over the horse hurdle, right? She can't run like the other kids. She has problems running the track when we do these exercises and she needs to lose weight. So my mother said, well, I'm going to Weight Watchers. Why don't you come with me? So I did. And back then, again, no blame on the program. It's where it was in the 70s, right? Um, there's bad food and there's good food. So you start labeling those foods at a young age. And again, that becomes part of your script that you follow as you become an adult. So later on, it was Tops. When I was out of college, it became Jenny Craig. When I was, I mean, I could go through the whole litany of all the weight loss programs I've been on. Going online, buying all those supplements that help you lose weight. And, I tried a lot of different things. Um, they worked for a while. But I think for me, the change I didn't make was here and trying to have a better understanding and knowledge of what it is I need to do to not just lose weight, but sustain that loss.
Right. That is so important. And just to highlight a couple of things on your journey that I think are very common for many people. Sneakers is making an appearance.
I'm sorry.
What kind of dog is Sneakers, by the way?
He's a German Shepherd Border Collie mix,
Oh,
and
so
I don't know why he's upset, but he just is.
not the center of attention, and I'm sure he has a lot of energy.
He does have a lot of energy, and he doesn't like that I closed the shades, thinking that would help the barking. But
Of
here we are.
course, of course. So to kind of go back to some aspects of your story, the Weight Watchers, and well, actually, even going further back, that where you described you saw your mother eating after dinner, standing at the kitchen counter, and yeah, kind of engaging in a mindless eating pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite incredible. Like we talk a lot about, oh, we should say this and we should use these words and this, that, and the other thing. But when it comes to kids and even adults and our learned behaviors, the words do mean something, because certainly having certain stigmatizing words and stuff like that can have a negative context. But when it's our models of who we should be as an adult, like our parents and older people, especially in those very formative years, it's the actions that they engage in that really imprint on us. And so you very
Mm-hmm.
much made the connection that, oh, I heard mom and dad yelling at each other or having an argument earlier in the day. Now mom is sitting at the kitchen counter and she's eating. You make the connection that, oh, when we're stressed, going to food helps us to do that. And you probably
Mm-hmm.
also very quickly, if your mom was a good cook and, hey, when I feel sad or upset, food makes me feel better, particularly these
Mhm.
very, high calorie, very palatable foods. And so you learn that early on that when I'm sad, I go to food and I
Mhm.
consume that food to make myself feel a little bit better. Even though afterwards you go and shame yourself and beat yourself up and I overate and
Yes.
everything like that. But
Mhm.
you still go to it. And then the next part of your story that's very interesting is, yeah, going into the Weight Watchers environment. And like you said, you're not putting blame on the program or your mom. They were just doing the best that they could at that point, right?
That's right.
We saw weight. Oh, it's his problem. Sherri wasn't able to keep up. The weight is the one thing that's very visibly different between her and the other kids. So, X plus Y must equal whatever.
Mhm.
And that becomes the script and the idea. And regardless of what, whether they were not trying to do it, it still leaves that lasting impression that we need to go to Weight Watchers, and that's where you started those programs. And like you noticed, those programs do work for a period.
Mhm.
They help you to lose that
Right.
weight, but it's not a sustainable weight for the long term, right?
Correct. Correct. At least not for me, it wasn't.
Absolutely, and I would say many people that is the same way, unless they have that mental epiphany or that idea that comes through. Where, I mean, what the research tells us is that it's an identity change, right?
Mhm.
You no longer are Sherri that just does the next diet plan. It's Sherri who's trying to be more mindful and engage in these patterns so that she can feel healthier, feel better, have less shame. It's Sherri the salad eater, it's Sherri the protein eater, not Sherri the Weight Watcher point counter kind of thing,
Mhm.
right?
Correct. Correct.
So tell us a little bit about, as you kind of moved through this journey from a very young age and then even into adulthood, what was some of the messaging you were getting from, say, healthcare professionals and some of the, I mean, even maybe colleagues or at work and that sort of thing?
Mhm. So, the colleagues at work, um, we actually started a Weight Watchers at Work program when I was at work, which was great, right? So you were with people that you knew and that were friends, and we could help support each other. But it also became kind of a, a social club, to be honest, where the focus wasn't on weight. It was more about, oh, what's happening? And did you follow these points? And so it was kind of almost like peer pressure, right? Um, there's also what I have found through my work environment through time is that there's different strategies to help employees. Certainly, people calling out sick, the weight does impact our health sometimes more than others, and so they tried, starting some mindfulness activities that you could join, and it was pieces of the puzzle is how I would say it, right? So we'll start this, and maybe this will help the employees who are more overweight. Um, let's start this piece over here. It wasn't a comprehensive, let's reboot and look at what it is that we need to do to incorporate a whole program and help people. So, is employee assistance program, is that part of this? Is, are there other aspects that need to happen? A lot of the people who had joined me at the work um, intervention, they were also smokers. And so they'd be outside smoking. So is it just the weight, or do you again have a broader program that says, hey, let's have a healthier environment? Let's incorporate exercise during lunch. Let's do this. And I think that's happening more and more. I certainly know for the place I work now, that's huge. They're looking at the whole person, not at pieces of the person. And I think that that's important. Um, Friends that haven't had to struggle with weight loss, their excuse me, their take is you pick a strategy and you stick with it, you lose the weight, there you go, right? It's not finite. It has to be this ongoing dialogue with yourself, doing the research, getting information. That's what I love about your videos is you're giving me information that I can use to make decisions that are right for me. So that's kind of the work environment. I think as I look at what are some of those other key things, you know, I really think that we label ourselves and what we should be doing. So I should be doing exercise every day, and it needs to be at a health club, right? That may be the message that I have in my head. And I'm like, "Ugh, but I put in overtime at work. Do I really want to head over 20 miles to my community center to work out today?" And again, it's that all or nothing. And so the messaging that I would get from my healthcare providers, I had some really good ones, and I've had some that weren't as helpful, right? So you walk in, and I have this one doctor who goes, "Well, I must tell you, you're overweight, and being fat is not healthy for you." And I'm like, "Really? I didn't know that." You know how helpful that was for me. I mean, that's what's going through my head, right? I look in the mirror every day. I really do. I comb my hair. I take a shower. I know that that's my issue. How about instead, let's have a conversation on what I can do? What are some things that will help me in this? And so recently, I have found that person who takes that time. Um, she sat down with me. She said, "Did you know there's some new weight loss medications that the FDA they've approved a couple, they're looking at another. Here are the pros and cons that patients that I've prescribed these to are telling me." So that was how she opened up the conversation with me. And that was so helpful because then I could take it from there and get the information that worked best for me to make that decision on whether or not to use it.
That is, I mean, that is so fantastic to hear that you finally had that that connection and that healthcare provider that actually took that time to sit down with you, kind of talk about the options versus just, I mean, pardon the terrible metaphor, but the elephant in the room. Like, duh,
Mhm.
we got it. It's fully aware. Everybody else in society has been telling me. Weight Watchers has been telling me. Like, yeah, we know this is the ongoing problem, and they don't have that same approach with the person who has blood pressure. It's like, oh, you know what? You've got high blood pressure. Here's the 6 things that you can do from a lifestyle, like reduce your salt, exercise more. But when it comes to obesity and overweight, it's just like, well, you got a weight problem. You just go home and fix it. Just eat less and move
Right.
more. Like, what the hell
That's
is your
right.
problem, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that adds to kind of the fuel of, you get in this all or nothing mindset and this idea that it's your fault, that you just need to move more, eat less. But as you've discovered over the course of your life, it's not just as simple as doing that. If it was, well, I wouldn't be doing this show and I wouldn't have a job and.
That's right. And I wouldn't be here talking about my journey either, right? If it were that simple along the way, I would have loved that. I mean, how
Absolutely.
easy, right? But there is no easy button for chronic illnesses and weight loss. There's just not. People think there is, right? I think these new weight loss medications, people think that's the easy button.
Totally.
And it's
Absolutely.
not. It's a tool to use with everything else. But it's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't had to experience this themselves.
Oh, yes. And I mean, I certainly, you get it in a day to day. I see it in my comments on my YouTube channel and that sort. And it's super frustrating because people say, well, you're taking the easy way out and whatever like this. And it's like, well, do you use AC? When you break your leg, do you go to the doctor and get it set and get a surgery? Well, you lazy motherfucker. Like, how dare you take the easy way out to cool yourself off? You should be living in a cave like our ancestors and doing it the primal hard way, right? And what people don't understand is that these medications and the new science and data that we have on managing this is that when you manage this condition, it takes such a burden off of you as the individual so that you can focus on the things that are important in your life. You can then take that willpower and apply it to how you show up in the world. Are you showing up as a good person? Are you, kind to the people around you, to the people at work, this, that, and the other thing? Are you being a great dog mom? Like, you can then take it and do to the broader picture of really what being a human being and what we're here to do. Like, we have continually made things easier and easier for ourselves so that we can do more, so that we can engage in these processes. The whole advent of the developing the plow allowed us to have our modern society. So if we weren't doing things to make our lives easier, well, then we would still be trying to bang rocks together and make a fire. But that's not how we evolve and why we developed the brains and the cognitive processes we did. So it's challenging. It's very hard to put up with that and to have people understand that. And I'm hopeful that you sharing your story here can allow that to happen a little bit more if they do happen to engage with this content, right?
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
In terms of your all or nothing thinking, that's a very interesting piece that I see a lot of people struggling with. And I would love to kind of get your opinion on where do you think that comes from? Like, why is it that, you can't just be like, oh, I worked an overtime shift, but you know what, I could do an extra, take the stairs or something like that to head out to my car, or just try to get 5 minutes in here. And then, what, tomorrow's a little bit better since I caught up today and worked a little bit later. Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to go to the health center or whatever. Where is that health all or nothing thinking for you? Where do you think that kind of started?
I think for me, it really did start when I would go see my healthcare provider as a young person, right? You need to lose weight, exercise more. That was the message at that time. Now I'm older than you. So we're talking back in the 80s, 90s, right? But um, that's one place. I think the other place is just kind of how we operate as a society, right? There's these judgments that are imposed, and that's become even worse and worse with social media, to be honest. But there's like judgments associated with things. Weight loss medications, easy button. Um, you don't exercise. You're lazy. You and that all gets into this frame of, oh, I'm lazy, I should exercise. So that's the magic bullet, right? I need to exercise more. And again, I think we're starting to evolve with people like you who are more advanced in your thinking about weight loss, and you're looking at more the whole person. But there's still a lot, a lot of people and messaging that's even subliminal out there that I think hits that all or nothing. I don't know if this relates to this or not, but it's the thing that popped into my head. So the airline saying we're going to weigh passengers that we think are over a certain weight limit, and they have to purchase 2 seats. Well, talk about stigma. And I get it. On one hand, I understand the why behind that. But on the other hand, instead of changing the seating in planes to make that money, as much money as they can, how about a section where people are overweight? Maybe we pay more for the ticket, but instead of adding that stigma, well, you would fit into 2 seats, not one. Well, if I'm in a first class seat, I fit into one seat. So, it's messaging, it's judgments, it's being told that things are one way and not broader than that. And yes, I should be able to make judgments about that. But when you hear it all through your life, those messages, again, it becomes kind of that tape that winds and replays over and over and over, where it's like this automatic response. when you hear those type of messages.
Well, and it's something I always talk to people about is that if it sounds like a duck, it looks like a duck, well, it must be a duck, right? And so if you get that message enough times and it's being repeated by not only by the doctor, by your mom, by the gym teacher, this, that, and the other person, well, yeah, you're going to start believing and internalizing that message. And I mean, this is very much the foundation of internalized weight bias, where you take that messaging on and the biases and the stigma that society has that it's the individual's fault and that sort, you then apply it to yourself and say, yeah, I'm at fault here. I'm the one that should has to pay for 2 plane tickets because I don't have enough willpower. I haven't tried hard enough. And yeah, I can see how that all or nothing can kind of come out of that of like, well, it literally is all or nothing. Like it's either I pay for 2 plane seats or I get to the gym and I work out and do all the things. And that's going to somehow be that magical bullet of it all. And yeah, that's very powerful in how that can negatively affect you. And I'm sure on the emotional perspective, I'm sure you've said things to yourself that you would never dream of saying to another human being when you don't fulfill that all or nothing thinking, right?
Hmm. Or when the weight starts coming back on because I hadn't built in that sustainment plan, and or thought about that. Um, and again, starting at the early age, seeing like you lose 28 pounds, but then over the next like 10 years going to college, 2 a.m., you're studying for those exams, or you're doing your paper, you're ordering Subway and pizza, and um, it really, I totally agree. The messages I give myself are much worse than what anyone else can give me.
And that's always the interesting piece is when I see people on the internet, berating people who have a weight problem, and it's like I can assure you, whatever you're saying is peanuts compared to what they've said to
Hmm.
themselves, and you're just fulfilling some other unmet need on your part of how you're an unhappy individual. But yeah, it's you're not doing any harm there that already hasn't been done by them, and
Hmm.
that's both just awful and heartbreaking at the same time.
Hmm. Yes.
For you, Sherry, what would you say have been some of the, I guess, the big highlights or kind of some of the turning points where the light bulb either, you shattered that glass ceiling or something kind of came through for you throughout your life?
Um, I think the first thing was when I did join a program, I did lose weight. I had all the strategies in place. So the health club workout 3 times a week. Again, it wasn't every day, right? It was 3 times a week. I go to work, I take the stairs. And they actually, at where I work, they actually did a competition where different units, I work in healthcare, and different units could paint a mural on the landing of each stairwell at work and have positive messages about you can do it and keep moving, and you've got the it's a those type of message. It was great, right? It made you want to go into that stairwell. And then they mapped out outdoor trails around the grounds, and they'd mark it off. This is a half mile, this is a mile, so you could get this map, and then you could plan, well, I have 20 minutes for lunch today, at least let me get a half mile in, and then you go out and do that. So there were some really good things that happened. So for me, that turned a light bulb on for me. I'm like, see, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I can incorporate lots of different activities. I don't have to go to a structured healthcare club. And and then I relocated to the Pacific Northwest from Milwaukee. And when I got out there, I mean, the weather, the state of mind was very different than the Midwest in terms of food, right? A lot more fresh foods and healthier foods. So I was able to incorporate more of that like fresh fish, which in the Midwest, if you want salmon or something, you're going to get it out of the freezer case, right? And so um, I was able to learn some different healthier eating patterns from that as well. And then I became president of an organic community garden. I learned so I could teach others in the community how to grow healthier food and how, what are the recipes and how do I cook this and can I eat this? And so I educated myself so I could help others become healthier as well. So that was probably the biggest epiphany moment that was positive in my life. And then, of course, sometimes we get those epiphany moments that are not good. And so last February, I actually had a stroke. And it was like, whoo. So everything you've been talking about wanting to do, it's time for you to do it and just make it happen. So thankfully, I was able to recover. But it was really what led up to that discussion I spoke of earlier with my healthcare provider on let's develop the plan for now, right? And she put me in PT so I could learn exercises. I had lost a little functioning in my foot and like the corner of my mouth, and so there were new things I learned that I still do even a year and a half later. And so that was that was the red flag, or the red flag on the field, on the football field, saying, "Yep, this is a penalty here. You got to change." So for me, I had that moment as well.
No kidding. Oh, I'm
Hmm.
well, I'm very glad to hear that you had the healthcare provider that was able to support you and work you through that. And yeah, it unfortunately sometimes for humans it takes a more catastrophic big deal event before it all really kind of like, oh my God, I need to actually do something about this. And you were certainly working in that direction
Yes, I had
and
already lost 40 pounds, but it wasn't enough at that point.
absolutely. And so, yeah, there's that kind of, I guess, that reinforcement for you that we need to keep going on this journey and step it up to that next level. And it would be great if we could have prevented it altogether. And, the stroke very well could have been entirely unrelated to your weight. It just happened to be clot developed and boom, there you go. But nonetheless, it's continuing to develop the health and the health patterns around it to prevent that and lower that risk going forward, just because we don't always know what the causal agent is for the stroke or what have you, right? But to go back to your workplaces, I mean that is absolutely amazing. I have not come across a workplace or a program that implements such a engaging kind of community and a societal aspect within that hospital or that unit, if you will. And there's so much value in that of changing the entire community's perspective, and not even making it about weight, just saying how can we all be healthier and enjoy showing up to work a little bit more. And if it's a competition to like paint a mural, it's not something that's, money driven or what have you, but it's just how can we all collectively do something together to uplift everybody. And I think the mapping out the trails as well, that's huge. That is so, so important because it's the little things that you just don't have the education on, or maybe you don't know where to start and you know where these trails are, but well, how long is this? What's this? And, there's a lot of things that you have to overcome before you're ready to take that step and to move forward and actually go out there and walk it. And if you can remove some of those barriers, well, like you said, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. And you're like, well, I've got 20 minutes. This is about a half mile. Cool. I can go out and do that. And you get out there and you're like, wow, that's actually quite enjoying this. Like I'm going to try and, build in more time to go for a longer walk on my lunch hour or what have you kind of thing. So there is a lot of power in that. And I think you have really shown the full circle piece that ends up happening for some people when it all really solidifies and clicks into place is when you start passing that knowledge on to other people. You've learned it, you've been through it, you have the experience, and now you're like, hey, I'm going to be a role model and share my knowledge, share my experience. And I think that's what some of the Weight Watchers and that stuff tries to do. But sometimes you can get a little bit of the blind leading the blind in that respect of it. But when it's more of a community garden, social aspect that's not focused around just weight, instead of just how can we get more vegetables in our lives? How can we grow our own food? There's a tremendous power that can come from that. So that, I mean, that is really, really amazing. And I mean, kudos to you for taking that role on and moving in that direction with it.
Thank you. Well, it was important. We had a partnership with the local school district, and they actually let us lease space on the school grounds on a back lot they had. And that's where we built the beds. You know, it was all volunteer, but we built the beds, and then teachers could bring the elementary school kids out to grow pumpkins in our community patch, or to help weed the food. We had a bed that was specifically for the local food bank. So
Right.
being able to help with that and instill that value of we're in community here, and this
Totally.
is how you do that. So yeah, it was
Oh,
great time.
absolutely. That is absolutely incredible. Yeah, I mean, very beautiful. And I think those kinds of programs, there's so much utility and power in them, and certainly passing it on to the next generation who
Mhm.
really need that insight. And the sooner and younger that we can develop those strategies and skills and insights. I mean, I don't have specifics on any kind of data, but I have no doubt that those kids that are exposed to those things at a younger age, they do substantially better into adulthood in not only managing their weight, but probably just general health and general life skills, right?
Mhm.
Um, okay, so you had the stroke last year, last February. Take
Mhm.
us through, you did the PT. You had mentioned that you were kind of just a few months on into the medication and stuff. What's been your journey to coming to weight loss medication?
So, as I kind of stabilized my physical condition after the stroke, um, again, it was, I mean, they sent me through a ton of evaluations and tests because we were trying to figure out, we know the weight was one of the factors, most likely.
Right.
But again, as you said, where did this clot come from? We don't really know. And so I went through lots of tests. I had really good health care. I even went to a neurologist. I'm in cardiology. You know, so I have this whole medical support system behind
Right.
me. And I think for me, it was the effort that they put in to trying to help me figure it out. I saw that and I went, well, I'm surrounded by this great team. They have some really good insights. They've kind of checked off the list of things it wasn't.
Right.
We don't know for sure what it was,
Hmm.
but I know that weight is a risk factor
Hmm.
in terms of stroke and heart disease. So, knowing my father died of a massive heart attack, my mother had several strokes starting at the age of 37. I mean, I could go through my family history and go, I knew all this, but it didn't click, right? And now it's definitely clicked. And
Yeah.
so when I went in for a follow up appointment to my provider, this would have been like last November. And she was checking in, looking at all the results of the tests and everything. And she goes, you know, we don't know. We don't know what this was, right?
Hmm.
And we may never know. So let's go back to the basics. Let's start here. We know the risk factors, you know, there's the trifecta, right? And let's start there. Which one
Right.
concerns you the most? And I said, well, weight has always been the thing. And knowing that probably is a huge factor in all of this, most likely, let's start there. So that's really what prompted the discussion with her. Um, Once I knew we've gotten as many answers as we can get right now,
Hmm.
um, I have a loop recorder that they placed in me so that they can track if it was AFib or not. So that's ongoing. Um, it really, knowing that I had that piece and I had the test results and I had my PT, I had OT, I had speech therapy, I had, And so now, where do we go? Yes, it's the weight. It's the weight loss journey. And let's look at what tools are there. This is her saying that. What tools are here to help support you?
That is
So,
all.
yeah, she's fantastic.
That is so incredible. And yeah, really a very holistic approach, not saying, yeah, it's just your weight. You just need to lose weight. And, actually doing the work and checking off all the boxes. Because, yeah, I mean, if you have a family history where your mom's having them at a very young age, weight or not, that shouldn't be happening in your 30s
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, right? And
Right.
fortunately for you, it wasn't until later on that you had it, but we
Mm-hmm.
need to look at all of the underlying causes, and rightfully so. We might never know what exactly caused it or anything, but what risk factors can we reduce and try to limit so that it doesn't happen again? We've got
Mm-hmm.
physical activity, we've got dietary patterns. Cool. Can we now utilize this pharmacological aspect of things to help you go to that next step?
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, a huge, huge piece of it. So, if you don't mind me asking, what agent did you end up initiating and going on?
I'm on Wegovy.
Okay,
And again, when she was explaining at that time last fall, it was Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro.
right.
Right, that was all the choices at that point. I'm not even sure Mounjaro had been FDA approved at that point. So she said, "Here's the pros and cons," and she actually wrote down the list and gave me the piece of paper at the end of the appointment. She goes, "Think about it, and when or if you're ready, we'll schedule another appointment. We'll do your lab work. We'll get the baseline weight, and then I'll start you on that." And she explained the process of start at the lowest dose and it keeps increasing, your body to get used to it. What I think she didn't anticipate, or that I didn't anticipate, was the fact that there's these shortages that were impacting what doses you start at, right?
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
so, and the other factors, the insurance company, it's highly expensive. Um, I have a really good insurance plan, but even they have been difficult in this process. Um, the pharmaceutical or the pharmacy that I was using that's associated with my healthcare insurance, I had received my first 2 months from them, and my provider went to increase it a dose, which is considered a new prescription, right, to this pharmacy and to my insurance company. And I went to fill it, and this pharmacy goes, "Oh, we're not carrying it anymore. There's always a shortage, and we're not going to have it on our list anymore." And I'm like, "What? Because people are complaining they can't get it?" Like, is this about customer satisfaction, or is this because you don't want to deal with the complaints, or is this about money? Like, what is it? And of course, I have no idea. But
Mm.
they just like stopped and didn't inform you until after that they weren't going to carry it anymore. So then
Wow.
it was, I need to find a pharmacy that has it
Right.
and then has at least some of the dosages I need. And there'd be like 1, 2, 3 week delay in between all of these gaps of trying to find. So it's this alone has been quite the journey to start on this medication and to keep going and
No
to,
kidding.
yeah.
Wow. And I mean, I hear all about the shortages, and we certainly had our own struggles up here in Canada, but thankfully, Wegovy hasn't been a problem yet. I think after the Mounjaro debacle that they had up here, and where it was here for like 3 weeks and suddenly massive shortage with it, I'm hoping that they've kind of learned some of their lessons and just being more mindful of that. That, yeah, you can't put a drug out, get everyone on it and switching to the therapy, and then, oh, sorry, we can't get it anymore. And it's just like, then what's the point? Why are we doing this? And so that is very, very challenging. And the back and forth, and just hearing the insurance providers, and I mean, a lot of people get on like Novo Nordisk and the various companies that do and
Mhm.
provide the medications, which rightfully so, they should be more
Yes,
mindful of that. But the pharmacy benefit managers, they have been, oh, we could have a whole conversation around
we
them and
could.
the problems that are there, right?
I could give you a story to go with that. Yes.
Absolutely. So, I guess when you have been on the Wegovy, have you found it beneficial? Have you had any side effects or problems with it at all?
So, the 0.25, which is the dose I was supposed to start on, they didn't have. So I started on the 0.5. That was probably, I mean, she thought it would, my provider thought it would probably be okay. She kind of warned me, you might have more side effects than if I had been able to start you at the lower dose, right? So the first couple of days, I had a low grade headache. It was always across, behind the forehead type of headache. Um, the nausea was there, but I never vomited any of that. It was more like waves, and it would last a short amount of time. And then after about 24 hours, both of the symptoms had subsided. And I really didn't have any more side effects until the next dose. So the next week, when you take the injection again, then you kind of get that headache back. And so that was my initial um, side effects that I experienced. But now that this is actually this week, I start my first maximum dose. And I haven't experienced those side effects much since that initial stage. And so I'm very fortunate. I have a close friend who started Wegovy about a month before me. She was vomiting. She had the GI upsets, and I haven't had those, and I'm thankful, very thankful. But yes, so I think that they're manageable. And my friend and I, we share stories. Well, here I wait till 9 o'clock to eat breakfast instead of having it right away in the morning before I go to work. And so we've tried to talk about some strategies uh, that would help with that. So for me, it's been really a helpful tool. It really has. The first week on it, I lost 8 pounds that first week. And now it's, of course, slowed down where I'm not losing that initial, whew. It's just like a pound, maybe 1.2 pounds a week. Couple weeks, didn't even lose any. It just stayed the same. But it got me over the plateau that I had reached. I had been on a plateau from December through February, and I was getting so frustrated. So when I went to see my healthcare provider, she's like, "It sounds like now is the time. Then, if you chose to do this, it's the time, right?" And so that's why we started it. So, hmm
Okay, so it sounds like, yeah, you're very much one of the some of the side effects, and I would say a majority of people are to some degree in your boat of things, where you definitely get some. It comes in waves, but it's manageable. Unfortunately, there is some people who are, yeah, they end up over the toilet, and we can somewhat mitigate maybe through kind of dietary changes and patterns and stuff. But some of it is just they're just more sensitive to the molecule, and it just has a stronger response, and yeah, it can have that negative outcome for them. But at the same token, you're kind of getting both the benefit where it's slowly coming off. Like, yes, there was the initial drop, but yeah, we usually see a pound a week or so, and then we have a couple of weeks where there is no weight loss whatsoever, which is absolutely perfectly normal. It's just you just continue with the changes and stuff that you're doing. The drug doesn't stop working or having a no longer doing what it's supposed to do. It keeps on working. You just need to keep consistent with the changes in behaviors. And it sounds like you have, well, with all the work that you've done, a much better relationship where, yeah, it's gonna ebb, it's gonna flow, but I just keep doing and engaging in the health behaviors that are helping me to be healthy overall. And the weight is coming off, which is one thing that we wanted to strive for, but it's not the end all be all. It's not like, oh my God, that is what needs to happen or I am not healthy kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, it's
Amazing.
a tool, right? It's a piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. No, that is huge. And I think you have, I mean, it's taken you all this time to really go through the trials and tribulations, if you will, of coming together with these insights and having a healthier mindset and recognizing you need to change that the psychology of it all to be able to move forward, to move away from the diets and the things that work short term and actually look at a long term strategy for yourself. So Sherri, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear more about your story, and I thank you very much again for sharing it with us. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or to kind of talk about?
Um, Probably the only thing I would say is for people who are on their own journey, right? We know that using the medication is not the only way to get there. And we talked about that already, right? It's a tool. You still have to do your research. I watched YouTube videos probably, I don't know, 12 hours a day on the weekends. I was trying to get as much information as I could. And as I said, I appreciated your channel where you were talking about these new medications and what might work. And then I think I pulled up some of the actual literature from medical journals and studies that had been done. I'd say read the last paragraph that talks about outcomes, because otherwise you're like, ah. But I think that research is really important. I even researched how do you give yourself an injection with this? Because I was like, oh, I can't give myself a shot. I hate shots. And I found this one YouTube video where she goes, we can do this together. And she walks you through it step by step. And so every week when I had to take the injection, I'd pull up this woman's video and we'd walk through it together. And that's how you do it. Um,
Nice.
and again, I want to stress, I think the biggest change is inside our heads, right? Everyone can have their opinions, everyone can tell you what they think it should be, the judgments, societal rules, whatever you want to call it. But we have to overcome that negativity ourselves. And that was probably the biggest change on my journey. And it still can be a factor. I still have some of those old messages coming through. But that's really the message that I would take. Overcome your fears, confront those challenging statements, negative statements that come through, and make them what you need it to be. Like, what is your why? My why is I want to be around for not just my dogs, but my family, my nieces, my great nephew. There's reason I want to travel when I retire in a couple of years. So that's my why. So find your why and then really just face it. You've got this. You've got this. So
Ah, awesome. That is, I think, a really great way to sign it off here there, Sherri. You've got it. It definitely is the truth that it is possible. It is possible to make those changes. And yeah, I very much appreciate you sharing your story again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's certainly individuals like yourself that really are great to highlight because your story is something that many people are struggling with and dealing with, and to see how you've worked your way through it, how you've overcome it, I think there's a lot of value and insight that can be taken away from that. So thank you again for sharing your story. It is absolutely a pleasure to meet you and hear a bit more.
thank
And
you.
yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll be back in the next few weeks with our next episode. So we'll chat with you then.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate everything you're doing to help us as well, Dr. Dan. Really. That's the only reason that I filled out your form to come on the air. I'm like, I really like him. He gets it. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.